So today I'm going to show you guys how I build my acoustic absorption panels that I'm going to be using in my brand new recording studio.
True Sound Studios is in your ears.
Now this isn't going to be just like any other video where I'm just going to take some random insulation, wrap it in fabric, hang it on the wall, and call it done. We're going to actually adapt these panels to the specific application, whether we're going to be putting the panels on the wall, we're going to be putting them on the ceiling, or we're going to be using them as cloud panels to hang over our mixing position. And then last, we're going to go over the type of insulation that is going to be used. And then also, we want to make sure that that fabric that we're going to be putting over these panels isn't going to let those little insulation fibers into the air so that we could possibly breathe them in. Okay, so there's a lot to go over in this video. Let's get going. Okay, so I have decided on a length and width for my acoustic panels. I'm making them 5 foot 2 inches by 31.5 inches, and I'm just going ahead and simply cutting the wood with a saw. Okay, so now that I have all of my lumber cut, let's just quickly go over the pieces. Right here, this is 1 by 4 inch pine, and this is going to be the sides of the acoustic panel. These pieces of wood right here in the middle, this is actually 1/2 inch plywood, but you could also use the pine. And this is for the ends of the acoustic panels. And all these small wooden strips are actually made from 4 foot by 8 foot long sheets of wood called Luan, or it's also known as underlayment. And I cut these to about 1.5 inches wide. And these are also cut to the same length as the ends of the acoustic panels. Now, I'll go over later on the reason for using these. These are great for cloud panels. But right now, let's just go ahead and start assembling the frames of the acoustic panels. So we're going to use 2 pieces of the pine and 2 pieces of the plywood. So some of the other acoustic panel build videos that I see here on YouTube, a lot of them are building the frames. They're pre-drilling all the holes for all the screws because they're using drywall screws or something like that. I use these screws called SPAX. It's a construction screw. It's got like a self-tapping head on the front of it. You do not have to pre-drill anything. I just put 8 screws in this first acoustic panel, right into the 3/4 inch pine, no pre-drilling, and didn't split a single area. These screws are amazing, especially when you're using this thinner wood. So I'm not sponsored by these guys, and trust me, I wish I was, because I spent a lot of money on these screws. But definitely just invest in some good screws. It saves a lot of time. Okay, so this is going to be acoustic panel variation number 1. So the way that I have this wood frame constructed, sound actually can't enter in through the sides or the top and the bottom. It can only enter in through the front or in through the back of the panel. So I want to be able to change that because I want these panels to be really effective with absorbing sound, really that's coming from any direction. So the only way to be able to do this is to either cut holes with maybe a jigsaw in the sides of the wood here, or what I'm going to choose to do is just slightly easier is use a hole saw, which is essentially just a large drill bit, to be able to drill some holes selectively, in certain spots of this acoustic panel. Now, obviously, you don't want to have too big of a hole. That's not going to leave enough wood left so that, the panel becomes kind of flimsy. And you don't want to drill them too small because it's not really going to be very effective. I'm using a 2 1/8 inch bit. If I had a 2 1/2, I'd probably use that. Now, it is your choice. You could assemble the panel like I have and then drill the holes in it, or you can drill these holes in an unassembled panel and, if that's any easier for you. Now, I'm only doing it on the sides of my panel, so the longer ends. I'm not going to do it on the top and bottom of this panel, just simply because of how I'm putting these into the ceiling. It's not going to really be as effective. So this is one of those variations that I just really haven't seen on any video and really does address the absorption coming in from the sides or the top and the bottom of the panel. So if you want to make your panels as effective as possible to be able to absorb as much sound as possible, I would go ahead and drill even bigger and even more holes than I went ahead and did. This will increase the amount of sound that the panel can absorb, especially if your room is smaller or you don't have quite the budget to be able to build a whole bunch of these panels. You'll actually be able to increase the effectiveness and the absorption of the panel by just having more holes and bigger holes in the side of it. Obviously, if you drill the holes too big, you're going to weaken that wood to the point where it's going to fall apart. So just be really careful of that. Okay, so now that I have the frame built for my acoustic panel, now I need to wrap it in fabric so that I can then put the insulation in there and call it done. Now this is one of those things that nobody really seems to talk about in these acoustic build videos, is what type of fabric to put down. So this is actually a pretty critical part of building a good acoustic panel. You want your fabric to be acoustically transparent, which just means that sound can travel right through the fabric, kind of as if it's not there. But you want to also make sure that your fabric is going to be able to stop the small little fibers that are inside your mineral wool, your fiberglass, or your cotton insulation. You don't want those fibers to work their way through the fabric, become airborne, and then you breathe them in. Now, for example, like me, I work in my studio every single day. I sit in here 8, 10, 12 hours a day. Breathing in all this fiberglass and mineral wool is not good for you. I mean, these fibers get into your lungs and blah, blah, blah. So I'm not telling you what type of fabric to put in there, but you really want to do your research. So if you don't want to spend the money on like Guilford of Maine, which is a very popular company that a lot of studios will use for their fabric, you can go a little bit more inexpensive and use something like this. Now this is weed control fabric, like the same type of landscaping fabric you would put down in your garden to stop literally the weeds from being able to grow through. Now this roll is 4 feet wide, is 200 feet long, and cost me about $45. Now what's great about this is it's breathable, and you can be able to check this by simply just breathing through it. And if you can feel the air move through the fabric and onto your hand, then you know that this is going to allow air movement. But what's great is it's kind of like a fabric screen, little holes in there. So this is going to do a really good job of trying to stop those little fibers from working their way through the fabric. And then after this goes on, I will also put on my finished fabric. So you essentially have like 2 layers of fabric to stop those fibers. Okay, so now we need to talk about the type of insulation you're going to put in your acoustic panels. Now this information I got straight from a studio designer that said that you really should use mineral wool insulation when your acoustic panel is between 3 and 9 inches thick. Okay, the depth of the panel. And then anything bigger than 9 inches, you want to use fiberglass insulation. So in this case, we're using 3.5 inch thick wood, so we want to use mineral wool. Now, mineral wool is also known as, some people will call it rock sole or rock wool. It's that like darker green or lighter green looking, very dense insulation. So without getting into too much detail, some insulation has formaldehyde in it. Formaldehyde has been linked to apparently causing cancer. I do not know all this information. Okay, when I tried to look it up, it was like somebody said this was super negative, and then other people were like, it's really not a big deal because it exists in a lot of other things that we have in our houses. But just do your research, okay? You might find out that you are allergic to formaldehyde. Putting it in a small room that is completely sealed up might have some sort of, reaction with your body. For me, because I have really bad asthma, I chose to get formaldehyde-free mineral wool. That was just my preference. So just look into formaldehyde. Formaldehyde-free insulation does exist, and that's what I bought for this studio. Back to the build. So now that I have chosen my insulation, now I can go ahead and start putting it inside the panel. Now these pieces are 15 inches wide and 4 feet long. So because I made my panel the width of exactly 2 of these pieces of insulation, I didn't have to cut either one of them and they fit in there really nicely, which just leaves the third piece at the very top there that I can go ahead and trim with an insulation knife, which is really nice to use, and I can link that in the description if you guys want to check it out. And then just pressing in place and obviously wearing gloves. And now I'm using the landscaping fabric again to wrap the back side of the panel just to help and try to stop those fibers from leaving the panel and becoming airborne. And then here I'm just using a pair of scissors to just simply trim the landscaping fabric to size. And then tipping it up so that I can go ahead and vacuum the floor just to get all those insulation bits up. So now I am laying down my finished fabric, once again making sure that it's acoustically transparent, and I'm laying it down upside down so the face is actually on the ground. Now I'm laying the panel on top of it. So the way that I do my finished fabric is I do both the long sides first, and then I go ahead and staple the shorter sides, just making sure to really pull it tight. So to staple them in place, I'm using that red pneumatic stapler, which hooks up to an air compressor, and it really saves your hand, especially if you're doing a ton of panels like I'm doing. Now, if you guys do want to check out this pneumatic stapler, I will put a link in the description. And then the corners here, I kind of do like a triangular fold, and then fold the flap over, and then just simply go ahead and put a few staples in it to make it stay. So here's the final look of the panel, but now we can actually go ahead and even modify this panel a little further by adding those wood strips on the back. Okay, so this is going to be variation number 2. Now I'm using this variation on my ceiling panels as well as the cloud panels that I'm putting over my mixing position. So what I did is I bought some Luan, which is also known as underlayment, and it's essentially just some thin wood. It's about 3/16 is the thickness of it. And what I did is I took a full 4x8 sheet and I ripped it into these 1.5 inch long strips. Now these 1.5 inch long strips, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount them on the back side of my acoustic panel. Because I'm hanging my panel on an angle on the ceiling, what's going to happen is these strips are going to help scatter sound in a kind of random, somewhat random way. So what's going to happen is sound will come through the panel and be partially absorbed, and then half of it will be scattered by these wood strips, and then the rest of the sound will make its way through the panel, hit the actual ceiling of the studio, and then come on back down. And this way we're kind of creating like an absorber diffuser all in one. All right, so let me show you guys what I'm talking about. Okay, so here I'm taking the 1.5 inch wide pieces of Luan, and I'm actually using some of the pieces as spacers, and I'm just going ahead and I'm using my pneumatic stapler again with some long 9/16 staples this time, so much longer staples, and just going ahead and making sure that they're square on the back of the panel and they're not hanging off, and then just simply going ahead and just stapling them all on the back side. You can see right here, it's a nice close-up of how I just stapled them into the wood frame. Okay, so really quickly, I just want to show you guys how I'm hanging all my ceiling panels. So I'm using my laser right there, and I measured center of this entire, I don't know what you would call it, a cavity. And I got the laser all set up, and it is drawing a dead center line down the whole room. And what I'm doing is I use these wood furring strips, and the wood furring strips allow me to essentially attach the acoustic panels anywhere I want, because I know that they're not going to fall onto a stud. So these furring strips are screwed into the studs, which goes through the 2 layers of drywall and the green glue into the actual ceiling joist itself. So this way, if I need to screw in over here, I can just screw into this furring strip and not have to worry about hitting the stud. So this is the hardware that I'm using to mount these ceiling acoustic panels. This was actually a metal mending plate, so it was just a long piece of metal. It's a pretty thick gauge. These are Simpson's strong tie, so they're really strong, and they're meant for structural things. Not that the acoustic panels are that heavy. But so this section from here to here is about 9 inches, and this is about 3. So now I'm going ahead and installing the first acoustic panel, and this one is a little tougher just because it's so close to the front wall there, but I'm using a speaker tripod stand to actually help me hold this panel up while I'm going ahead and putting all these screws in. Okay, so there is one panel. If you can kind of tell, but that actually end of the panel is actually much further down than this piece. And this remaining bracket is actually how the next panel gets mounted. It'll be something like that in the end. And this way, all the panels are staggered. So we'll have a low end and then high, and then the next one starts low and goes high and then just keeps going. So as you can see here, I have now 2 panels installed, and once again, just using the same metal brackets to mount these. In this view, you can see the angle of each acoustic panel, and I believe it was 4 or 5 degrees was the actual angle. And this is the back view, so you can see how one bracket actually is taking and supporting 2 acoustic panels on each end. So now the last panel we haven't mentioned is the wall acoustic panels. So what I did in my studio is I actually built the wall panels right into the wall, so it's its own structure. Now if you don't want to do that, what you can do is actually buy these heavy duty frame hangers. And what these are is, it's kind of like a picture frame hanger, and you would screw these to the back side of your acoustic panel and then hang them on the wall just like you would a picture frame. Now these work really well because these acoustic panels weigh between 10 and 20 pounds, whether or not you put those wood slats on there, and these heavy duty hangers can definitely deal with that weight. If you do want to check these out, I will put a link in the description. Now there is some other variations you could actually do with these wall panels. You know how I put all those wood slats on the back side so you actually can't see them? With the wall panels, just like I did here in the studio wall panels, I actually put the wood slats on the outside. Now I found on a lot of audio forums that they would actually put the wood slats on the outside of it. You can obviously choose a different type of wood. A lot of people do recommend MDF, but I really couldn't find necessarily a great reason why you would want to use the MDF opposed to other woods. Now with the wall acoustic panels, I would still absolutely put them on an angle. That's going to help once again break up those parallel surfaces and cut down on the flutter echo that you might have between your 2 side walls or your front and back wall. So I am putting these acoustic panels in my control room. So this is where I do all the producing, mixing, and mastering. But I'm actually making the exact same panels, just different sizes, for my vocal booth. So I'm using this exact same design in my vocal booth. So you can use these panels in a variety of different areas, maybe a live room, a vocal booth, a control room. Now, exactly where to put these in the different types of rooms is going to be something that you're going to have to either figure out or go ahead and contact me in a different way, and we can work out where and how many of these panels to put in your room. And then something I forgot to mention was actually getting into the cloud panels. Now, the cloud panels I built just like the other ceiling panels with the wood slats on the back, except over a mixing position area, you really want to try to reduce any of those reflections off the ceiling. So you might actually want to make the cloud panel much thicker. One of the studio designers I've been talking to actually recommended putting 3 layers of 3.5 inch Roxol, rock wool, mineral wool in your cloud acoustic panel. Now, just once again, those are the ones that you would hang over the mix position off of the ceiling. I made my panels still 3.5 inches thick, put the wood slats on the back, except because I have this large beam above me, I actually put the rest of the insulation in the beam so that I didn't lose any more head space. So here in the studio, I put up 3 panels on one side of this large beam, 3 panels on the other side, like I had mentioned, but then I put 2 almost 4 foot by 4 foot panels right above my mix area. So I essentially have an 8-foot long cloud panel right over my mixing position. And then slightly further back in the room, I put another 4-foot by 4-foot panel. So I have 3 large clouds in the center of the room, and 2 of those are right over the mix position, and then 3 on one side and 3 on the other side. So if you guys do want to see how I built my wall acoustic panels, or even the back wall, or maybe you want to get into how to build a recording studio. This was actually an entire garage at one point, and now it's a very large control room with a vocal booth and a storage area. I converted this all myself, and I documented the entire thing. As of right now, there's 12 videos. There's probably going to be 15 or 16 in the end. It's a very, very detailed series on how I built this entire series. So you guys can go ahead and find those videos right here on YouTube. I will leave a link in the description, and you also find it at the very end of this video. So just one more thing, if you guys do want to stay up to date with True Sound Studios, go ahead and follow True Sound Studios on Instagram. So if you do follow True Sound Studios on Instagram, go ahead and direct message me, and I can actually send you 6 pictures of the entire acoustic panel build. This way it just might be a lot easier to reference these pictures opposed to having to go back to the video if you're going to go ahead and build these acoustic panels yourself. So thank you guys for watching this video. Hopefully I gave you guys some motivation to go ahead and build your own acoustic panels that are really going to be not only effective, but also safe to put in your mixing space.